And guys, this is inner work. This is soul work. This is spirit work. This is mental, emotional work. Because here's the deal: if you don't actually believe that it's possible for some good to come from the death of this dream that you're walking through, you will not see it happen. Hey, welcome back to the Daron Earlewine Podcast. I'm really excited for this series we're going to do. We're going to do a 6-week series, guys, called The Resurrection of Purpose. If you're following along with this here on the podcast, you know we just finished the Death of a Dream series. And man, oh man, were those interviews amazing. I loved every single one of them. And what I wanted to do, guys, with that series is begin to just kind of set you up and really bring proof that resurrection of purpose is really possible, right? Because we're gearing up for the release of this, and I actually have a real copy right here with me. My first book, The Death of a Dream, Resurrecting Purpose When Life Doesn't Go as Planned, coming out October 18th. Here's the cool part. As you're listening to this podcast, and I actually really want you to do this, you can go to barnesandnoble.com right now, and you can pre-order the book so you get it shipped to you and you're ready to go on October 18th. And it actually would make a massive difference for me. So my favor to ask of you is, if any podcast has ever improved your life, or you've enjoyed it at all, or you find me mildly entertaining, right? If we're a friend at all, I think there's a great line from Tombstone about that. Well, it's Doc Holliday's dying, right? He says, "Why, if you were ever my friend, leave now," right? Anyway, it's my favorite movie. Sorry, don't edit this, Coop. People just need to see what happens in my brain as I'm trying to do a real podcast. Listen, if you've ever been my friend, if you like this podcast, go pre-order the book, because if we have a bunch of pre-orders, it makes launch day such a big deal. It allows the book to get out there and allow more people to know about it and make a difference. Because here's what I know. What the book shows you, what that last podcast series, the Death of a Dream podcast series, shows you, is that we've all experienced the death of a dream in some way, shape, or form. And there was a lot of different ways we looked at that. We talked to Molly Huffman. I mean, what just a heart-wrenching, really, story about the amount of loss that she went through, right? When we sat down with Ken Barlow and he talked about finding that way, the path least, taken, and how God had a whole plan that wasn't his childhood dream, but was, 12 times, better than what he'd expected. Sitting down with Jordan Lee Dooley and talking about the idea of embracing the almost. And then Matt Dorado, oh my gosh, that I can't take it. I love that episode so much. And then we got a chance to sit down with Janice Argwal. And guys, what we saw about that is that there is a connection between the death of a dream and the resurrection of purpose. And what I want to do with these next 6 weeks is just take a few principles from the book and walk you through the process of what you need to do to begin the process of resurrecting purpose in your life. Because I'm guessing if you're over the age of 16, 17 years old, you've had some kind of dream die. And the question is, now what? What do I need to do to begin to take my next step to see purpose resurrected? Okay? So we're going to walk through that in the next 6 weeks. I hope you enjoy it. I hope you pre-order the book. Would love to hear from you. As always, you can reach out to me on all the socials. Just search for Daron Earlewine on Instagram. On Facebook, I'm on there. Or you can email me directly, Daron@blackbirdmission.com. Would love to hear from you and questions, comments, things that are going on in your life as we're going through this. And so here's your first step. Here's your first step of what do you need to do if you're going to begin to resurrect purpose in your life. Here's where it starts. You have to believe it. You have to believe it's possible. And guys, this is inner work. This is soul work. This is spirit work. This is mental, emotional work. Because here's the deal. If you don't actually believe that it's possible for some good to come from the death of this dream that you're walking through, you will not see it happen. It's step one. You have to believe it. You have to believe that it's possible. And guys, I know that's difficult stuff, because when you're in the muck, when you're in the mire, when you're in the pain, when you're in the confusion, when the reality that life is not fair and you're experiencing the pain of the unfairness, it is so difficult to believe that this could ever get better or that any of this could actually be woven into some kind of purpose or good going forward. And I'm not saying you got to just, you got to force that. I'm not saying that that's something you just got to, white knuckle that together. I'm not saying that's something that happens overnight. We're talking in the past series, right? Some of the stories of the resurrected purpose and the deaths of those dreams, it wasn't like something happened and then overnight somebody said, I just started believing it was going to be great. And then I just flushed all those negative emotions and poof, magic trick happened. No, it was years and years and years. And you may have to fight for that belief, but you need to fight. Couple of scriptures I want to throw at you right here is one of the ones that I share throughout the book is we walk in the book through the story of Joseph in the Old Testament. And I tie this life of Joseph together with the death of my dreams throughout my life, and then tie those to the Beatitudes, because I really believe that Joseph is just an amazing personification of the Beatitudes that Jesus shares in Matthew chapter 5. Here's one that applies to this. It says this in Matthew chapter 5, verses 7 and 8. I'm reading from the Message paraphrase. You are blessed when you care. At the moment of being careful, you find yourself cared for. You're blessed when you get your inside world, listen to this now, your mind and your heart put right. Then you can see God in the outside world. This is that process of beginning to believe that God is with you in these unfair moments. Begin to put that inside world, do the difficult soul work, the difficult emotional work, the difficult mental work that you need to do as you've walked through the death of a dream. Get that put right, because then you can begin to see God in the outside world. You can begin to see God at work in your life through the circumstances that aren't fair. I said you need to believe that resurrection is possible, but there's a couple other parts I want to bring into this. You got to believe that this resurrection is possible of your dream and of purpose. But I would also say this: you got to believe that life's not fair, and God is with you, and resurrection is possible. Right? That's really how this works. Is owning the fact that life is not fair, and God is with you. And these two things can actually coexist at the same time. They're not, mutually exclusive. Is life's not fair? What's happened to you, what you're walking through right now, this isn't fair. This shouldn't have happened. If in a perfect world, this is not what the way it should be. It's not fair, but God is with me in this moment. And I hope that gives you ability to get your inside world right, because if you don't believe those two things can be possible, you're going to stay mad for a long time. In the book, I talk about that part. In page 65 of the book, I say this: we can stay mad if we want. We can assume that God has left us to fend for ourselves. We can attempt to take control of everything and make things work out for ourselves, even if it means lying, fighting, stealing, cheating, or working ourselves to death. These options are survival mode and will eventually leave us tired, isolated, and maybe even in rehab. These options are fueled by the assumption that we have to figure this out on our own. We're not alone. Life isn't fair. What's happened to you, what you're walking through, it's not fair. But you're not alone. In the book, I walked through the story of Joseph, and if we're ever looking for a situation where somebody could have been like, hey, listen, life is not fair, it's Joseph. He was his dad's favorite son. He had, his dad, Jacob, had 12 sons. Joseph was his favorite, and Joseph had dreams, right? He had dreams, and his dad loved him, and in fact, he made him a Technicolor dream coat. It talks about he had this special coat that he made him, and his brothers couldn't stand him. And they couldn't stand him because he was his dad's favorite, but they also couldn't stand him because he had these dreams, and he told them. And there's a sense there was probably some arrogance, possibly some youthful immaturity and arrogance there in Joseph. And so his brothers, if you've never read the story, go read it. It's in the book of Genesis. His brothers betray him, sell him into slavery into Egypt. He ends up going down to Egypt, and it's just one unfair thing after another. But the consistency of all of Joseph's story is that God is with him even in the unfair circumstances. And that may be emotionally difficult for you to accept right now because you're saying, listen, this isn't, my assumption was that if I was following Jesus, that everything was supposed to be perfect. God wasn't going to let me struggle or have problems. Well, sometimes suffering and sometimes the death of the dream, they take us face to face with these presuppositions we have about God that just aren't true. And we really need to go back and look at the scriptures and say, well, what did Jesus say? Well, in the book of John, right before Jesus is about to go through literally the most unfair thing that could ever happen, because Jesus was perfect. He was completely innocent in what he went through to actually be betrayed by his friends, right? To be wrongly accused, to be put through a complete false, fake, unfair trial, and then to be put to death for the sins of the world, being a sinless human being. There's no image of more something that is more unfair, the death of a dream, more than Jesus Christ himself. But right before Jesus goes through this, right, he says in John chapter 16, verse 33, says this, you, in this life, you will have struggles of many kind, right? In this life, it's not fair. Recording this episode actually on my dad's birthday. Happy birthday, Dad. And my dad would say to me all the time growing up, and maybe your dad or mom did this too, but I'd complain about, so this is not fair, it's not fair. And I probably heard my dad say a million times, hey son, guess what? Life's not fair. One of the best pieces of advice he ever gave me, and it was true. Life's not fair. Jesus says, listen, life's not fair. You're going to have struggles in this world of many kinds. But then he says this, but take heart, for I have overcome the world. He's with you in these struggles. And in these struggles, what can actually happen is these things can begin to purify our character, put our inside world right, so we're ready to become the kind of person that can live in this purpose that God wants to resurrect in us. The Word of God talks about this too in James chapter 1. This is one of those scriptures that you read it and you're like, no thanks, don't apply to me. Move, skip, fast forward. But we need to hear this one, especially if you're wrestling through believing that resurrection is possible, that life is unfair, that God could be with you and resurrection is possible. Check it out. James chapter 1 says it like this. Dear brothers and sisters, when troubles of any kind come your way, any kind, so that the ones that you cause yourself, the ones that other people cause, the ones that are maybe fair, you know what, I deserve this one, or the ones that are completely unfair. It doesn't matter. He says, when troubles of any kind, so everything's included, okay, select all, they're all there. It says this, consider it an opportunity for great joy. Say again, what you talking about, Willis, right? Remember that one, Different Strokes? No, you were born in the 80s. You don't never watch Different Strokes. Go watch it. It's probably on Netflix or something. Great show. Anyway, consider it an opportunity for great joy. Rarely do that. That's not my first response, but here's why. Here's why we need to. He says this, for you know that when your faith is tested, your faith that you actually believe that life is unfair and God is still with me. Right? Because isn't that really where the nuts and bolts of our faith shake out to? I know we talk a lot about heaven and hell and believing I'm forgiven, and that's big. I'm not taking anything away from that. But once I've figured that part out, once I know that I'm on my way to heaven, that my eternity is secure in who Christ is and his grace and his sacrifice, where my faith really breaks down often is right here. It is knowing that when my faith is being tested by things that are going wrong, that I think that's unfair, that I actually have faith that God has not abandoned me, that he's still good, that he's for me, not against me, that he's near me, not far away, and that he's created me on purpose and for a purpose, and that what I'm going through is going to test that faith. Says this, in that testing, it's going to actually test my faith, and my endurance will have a chance to grow. So then James goes on and says, so let it grow, for when your endurance is fully developed, you will be perfect and complete, needing nothing. And that's really, guys, what Christ is after for all of us, is when we walk through these valley of a shadow of death type of moments, these unfair moments, he's testing our faith because guess what? He has a purpose for you that is so much bigger than just you. He has a purpose and a plan for you that's so much greater than whatever you've dreamed up on your own. But I tell you what, when the thing that you've dreamed up on your own is dying in front of you or is dead, it's really difficult to believe there's going to be something on the other side of this better than what you dreamed up, better than what you thought your life was going to be. That you could ever come out of this unfair, terrible moment that you've gone through. But you can. That's why I wanted to start with the stories we had in the Death of the Dream podcast series prior to this one, so that you could see that I'm not just coming out here throwing out some scriptures with you, some Pastor Jesus talk. Well, that's what Daron thinks, but let me see some proof of this. Well, go back and listen to the last sermon series, and you'll see proof of how God works. But whether the scripture says it, well, whether I say it, whether it's in the book, or you listen to 5 or 6 episodes of people's stories, it still comes down to you. Do you believe it? Do you believe that life can be unfair and God can be with you? And because God is with you, resurrection of your purpose is still possible. From page 65 in the book says this: accepting the reality that life is not fair is far more bearable when we know we're not alone in it. Ever. God is with us and for us. And when we learn that we can fully lean into God's character, we gain a renewed energy to live and live freely without scorekeeping, withholding, or trying to take control. It's just true, guys. And that's where we have to start. And it might be something for you right now where you're in the struggle, and that's okay. I spent 3 weeks this summer traveling around the country, getting to speak at youth camps, and I had a conversation often this summer with people who were in the process of wrestling with their faith. The particulars of their stories were different, but the reality of where they were was the same. Wrestling with their faith because life wasn't fair. And feeling like somehow that this wrestling that they're having with God was disrespectful to him or somehow excluded them from this pursuit of faith. And I told them the same thing I'm going to tell you today. As so often we forget, or maybe no one's told you this story, that in the Old Testament, Jacob, right, Joseph's dad, was wrestling with God. He was going back to meet his brother Esau, and he had betrayed him, and he wasn't in a good way. And here he is, and this angel of the Lord comes. And some people believe that this could have actually been Jesus showing up in the Old Testament before. It's deep theology. We're not going to get into it. Whether it was Jesus or an angel, it was an angelic being. And Jacob wrestled all night with him. And at the end of the day, as the morning was breaking, he said, I'm not going to let you go, and I'm not going to stop wrestling until you bless me. And so the angel touched him in the hip, actually wrenched his hip and caused him to walk with a limp the rest of his life. And after that, the angel said, your name is no longer Jacob, but your name will be Israel. Maybe you've never heard this before, but I hope you never forget it after you hear it right now. Is you know what the word Israel literally means? It literally means wrestles with God. So when God chose a people to be his people, to show his faithfulness and what it means to be connected to God, and God be your God and you be God's people for all of humanity, when he chose a people and they became the nation of Israel, the nation of people who wrestle with God. So if you're thinking that you're at a place right now where you're trying to get your inside world right, you're trying to get your heart and your mind around the fact that, okay, maybe I can trust God. I know life's not fair, but maybe he is here with me, and I'm beginning to see how he's showing up in my outside world. I'm beginning to actually have little twinges and just sparks of hope that maybe there is some purpose that could be resurrected out of what I've gone through. But I'm still wrestling, Daron, and I feel like maybe God's mad at me because it's taken me a while to get my faith straight. No, he's not. He's not mad at you, and guess what? He's not in a hurry either. There's quite a few stories in the Old Testament, right, where God was like, hey, we can take 40 years, no problem. And in the 40 years, he wasn't sitting around just mad and angry, and I'm just so mad at the, no, he's just not in a hurry. So if you're at that place and you say, you know what, Daron, I'm really glad you guys starting this series because I'm at a place where I have to see God resurrect something out of this pain. You're okay. You can keep wrestling with it. But here's what I need you to do. I need you to begin asking God to increase your faith and help you believe that life can be not fair and he can be with you in it. And because he's with you, he will, not could, he will resurrect purpose out of this pain that you've experienced. That's where I want us to go together, guys, over this next, 5 or 6 weeks together. That's why I want you to order the book. Go to barnesandnoble.com right now. Pre-order the book. Comes out October 18th. I want to get it in your hands right away. And I want you to have it on the 18th. So please go right now. Order Death of a Dream. Just go to Barnes & Noble, search my name or the title of the book, and you can get it. And then you can begin to read along. And I hope that it serves as a help, as an aid, as a spark plug for you to begin to see this resurrected hope happen. Because God has a purpose for your life. I told you guys now, if you've been listening to the podcast, I don't know, it's like episode 100 billion. I don't know how many we've done, right? I tell you the same thing every week because I don't want you to forget it, right? God's for you. He's not against you, even in this unfair situation. God's near you, not far away, and because he is, no matter what you've gone through, whatever troubles may come, you can see it as pure joy because you know that he has the power through his presence. He's resurrecting purpose in you right now. And in that purpose, you're going to find your future. And in that future, you're going to find your hope. And I can't wait to walk that process with you. And it's going to be an awesome time during this series. Listen, if you have questions, you have thoughts, like I said, hit me up. All you got to do is reach out, Daron, Daron, at blackbirdmission.com. You can hit me up on the socials. You can also text me at 317-550-5070. Would love to hear from you. I'm going to join with you guys next week. Next episode, guys, we're going to talk about this. We're going to talk about mourning it, celebrating it, and then letting it die. It's the next process. We got to believe it. Then we step into that process of mourning it, celebrating it, and letting it die. That's what will be next week. Can't wait to hang out with you here on the Daron Earlewine Podcast. Talk to you guys next time.